All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started because it's 6:30, and I just want to welcome everyone tonight. Just a reminder, we are recording, and we will have a time for question and answers where you can unmute and we can have discussion. But for now, if you can just keep your phone or your computer on mute, or your phone, however you're logged in, that would be great and helpful to us. I'm just super excited that you guys are here tonight. We had a great kickoff at our orientation last week. We don't always have two events back to back like this. And so thank you for joining us again this week. And then there'll be a little bit of a break until our November meeting. And hopefully everyone is receiving my emails. If you're having issues with emails going to spam, I did send a different email today that maybe came to you a little bit easier. I think when I BCC the email with all of the email addresses, sometimes that might go to spam. So please indicate in the chat if you're not receiving the emails from me. I know there were a couple of people who were not. And then I want to take a little bit of time to just, I'm going to exit out of here real quick and pull up our all-in-one place CIPL document for now. And so many of you I've seen have logged into this. This is where you'll find the webinar recordings, the upcoming Zoom links. There's my contact information. Several people have already arranged to have a phone call about our projects. So I appreciate getting text, emails, phone calls. We can start scheduling project meetings in the next month. And then each time we have an event, so each webinar event, I'll need you to go in and fill out the survey. So for tonight's survey, it will be CIPL webinar number 1. And you'll put that in the box that indicates what the event type is. As always, if you have any questions, you can just drop them in that last column there. These are the announcements from last week. So I introduced a little bit about what we're doing with family-friendly schools and gave you the login information for that page. Several of you have taken the opportunity to apply for our advisory council, so that's super exciting, and we're glad to have you joining us. And then supporting Family Engagement Week. So there's some promos there that you can use to engage others in Family Engagement Week and learn more about what we're gonna do during that November week. Many of you have joined Groundswell, and you're gonna hear a little bit more about what it means to be a member of Groundswell this evening, and then following us on social media. So this is kind of where we're keeping all of our information for right now, and you've got that link in your email. So any questions that you guys might have about that? And if you think of something, you can just drop it in the chat as we go along. So those are the big announcements that I have. We will be hearing from several folks from our team tonight, so I'm excited to have them with us. And if you did not get to watch orientation live, make sure that you go back to that recording and watch that before you go any further. I think it's going to get a little confusing as we start talking more about our projects if you haven't went back to the orientation webinar. So my encouragement after tonight is make sure you catch up on orientation if you weren't able to attend, get caught up on your surveys, and then think about a time that works for you that you can schedule to have a phone call with me about your project. So we're still letting some folks in the room. And we have about 5 minutes until I actually told Bridget we would get started in the presentation. So this would be a great time if you have questions about any of these announcements to go ahead and ask.
I have a question. Do you have like a recommended timeline for starting the project, or I'm still not real clear on the scope of this project? It would be helpful if maybe I think you said there was a recording of presentations, if that could get posted, just so I could get a sense of what the expectations are and then plan accordingly.
Yeah, so I'll be dropping those in this box here with the announcements as a resource. I think what will be more helpful is for us to schedule a quick phone call one-on-one. The sooner the better, because the previous years have run into unexpected challenges. So you know, the 2020 class, if they waited, you know, a lot of them were revving up for their project to come to completion in February and March. Well, a lot of things got shut down. So the events and the plans that they had because of COVID, they weren't able to follow through with. So my my advice, because of what's happened the last couple of years, is to start earlier and not wait till the April 15th deadline, because you never know what's going to happen. And I don't anticipate that we're going to have any major school shutdowns, but if you are planning on doing something with your school, it would be really helpful for you to kind of see what they're allowing as you're thinking about your project, because I know some schools are also not doing a lot of events or allowing parents to necessarily use buildings right now. So that's been a little bit of a challenge that I've heard. So regular meetings, things that you might do where you host an event at the school, you might have to look for another community place to do that and organize your event there. So
okay. I'll email you and we can set up a time to chat, because I have thoughts. I just don't know if they match what the intentions are or the scale or the scope. That's all.
Yeah, and tonight you're going to hear from our president and CEO about our Big Bold Future. And one of the things that we've done recently is updated our community profiles. And I think that that will be a nice starting point too, to kind of see where your district is on that community profile, and that might help spark some ideas for a project as well. We have several people out tonight. It was parent-teacher conference night, so I'm glad that they're attending parent-teacher conference. Certainly, that's where they need to be tonight. So Bridget, I think we're like 2 minutes away, but I think we've got most of the folks who are going to be here tonight, so you can go ahead and get started. And I'll switch back to your presentation here.
Okay.
And I did include this slide just because I love it. So I hope
right.
that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely, Laura. Yeah. And I'm sorry, everyone. I'm trying to find a good spot for the light and I am having some trouble. So I don't want you to, I hope maybe you'll pay attention to the slide and less me with the lighting I've got here. So let me just try to move a minute and get to a better spot. Okay, I think that will be maybe a little better. Okay, great.
That's great. That's great.
Okay, good. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on a weeknight evening to talk about parent leadership and the Pritchard Committee's vision and mission, our goals for the future of education. I did notice a Bridget amongst us, and I just have to comment that I really like how you spell your name. So hopefully Bridget hears that. Our names are spelled in unique ways. So Laura, thank you for sharing this kind of introductory slide. Welcome to CIPL with this picture of me from 2000, 21 years ago, my goodness, when I went through CIPL. My children, my oldest son was in, I believe, first grade at the time, and he is the oldest of 4. So I went through CIPL much like you are today when my children were in school, and I was committed to finding a way to have an impact in my local district, which at the time was Pendleton County, Kentucky, in the northern part of the state, about an hour south of Cincinnati, a rural district. And I was serving on the local board of education at the time. So CIPL gave me the tools, the language, the background information that I needed to be the best community advocate for education that I could be. And we hear so many folks say how transformational CIPL is for them in helping them own their passion for education and own the tools, the resources, and the language that helps them be seen by others as that champion with depth of knowledge. So it was an impactful journey for me, and I know it will be for you. So Laura, I'll jump into our presentation. Are you going to flip slides for me? Okay, great. So a couple years ago, we launched the Groundswell Initiative. And the Groundswell Initiative is our effort to engage more Kentuckians in the Pritchard Committee's work. We're almost 40 years old. So at this point, we're really looking at how we bring the next generation of leaders into the Pritchard Committee's work. The first 40 years found Kentucky climbing from the bottom of the national rankings to roughly the middle, depending on which education indicator you look at. And so our goal for many years, and continues to be today, is that Kentucky finds itself among the top tier of all states when it comes to education outcomes, early childhood, K-12, and post-secondary. And so engaging the next generation in this work is imperative for us to go from good to great, if you will. So Groundswell is our answer to doing that. And a big, bold future is the way we've tagged this movement. In previous years, the committee had a national rankings report called the Top 20 by 2020. And it was launched in 2008 with the goal of Kentucky being in the top 20 of all states by 2020. So we've now turned that corner. And unfortunately, well before the pandemic, in about 2018, 2019, we had to say to our members and Kentuckians that while Kentucky had made great progress since the 1980s, especially into the 1990s and 2000s, we were now starting to see significant declines in our national rankings. So at that important moment of 2020 and that campaign, we were having to say, we're going in the wrong direction. So we have relaunched a national rankings report now in 2021. And Laura, you can go to the next slide. It's called our Big Bold Future National Rankings Report. We launched it last fall, coming out of our annual meeting. We chose 12 primary metrics that we could use to compare Kentucky to other states. So that put some parameters around which metrics we would choose. As an example, in K-12 education, we choose the NAEP rankings because those can be compared to other states across the nation. K-Prep cannot. So these metrics, that's a rule for these metrics that we can compare ourselves to other states. Because we were launching this in the midst of COVID and broadband internet access became so critically important, we included this 13th metric around high-speed internet access. You also see 4 kind of primary categories here: early childhood, K-12 education, higher education, and quality of life. And the quality of life bucket is new for us as well. In the Top 20 by 20 report, we had early childhood metrics, K-12 metrics, and some post-secondary metrics. But we hadn't asked the critical question all these years as we have been about improving education outcomes. Are we truly realizing a path to a larger life for more Kentuckians, which was our namesake's mantra? And the answer is unfortunately no. While increased education outcomes has certainly improved the lives of individuals, and each of you know folks, or you may be one of those individuals who can tell a story about education really changing the trajectory of your life. Unfortunately, when we look at median household income, Kentucky still lags the nation significantly, and we rank 4th, 5th, I believe now 6th from the bottom of the nation in poverty. So all this time, while we have made improvements, we've not moved the needle on poverty. And we know that's the ultimate outcome we want to see as we improve education outcomes. So quality of life here was an important additional category that we chose. And you see the 3 metrics that we chose here. Some of you might question why voter turnout. And again, we needed to choose metrics that would allow ourselves to compare Kentucky to other states. And voter turnout was the best metric for us to do that as a proxy for community engagement. We know that as individuals are more engaged in their community, they're more active, they're more civically engaged, they're much more likely to turn out to vote. Kentucky's ranking is not bad, 25th in the nation. So we'll continue to track this as, again, a proxy for community engagement. And we'll have other Kentucky-specific metrics that we look at to really track whether we're increasing community engagement that leads to then improved outcomes at the local level. One metric I want to draw out here, that's the one that I use to illustrate our progress or lack thereof since the 1990s or since the 1980s, is 4th grade reading proficiency. So Kentucky, when the Pritchard Committee began its work, we were dead last, except for at times Mississippi. With apologies to Mississippi, we were dead last in nearly every indicator you could think of. And literacy was certainly one. By 2008, Kentucky ranked 8th in the, by 2015, Kentucky ranked 8th in the nation in 4th grade reading. 8th in the nation is astounding and something we certainly were proud of at the time. But here you see the example of why the Pritchard Committee has been saying we're beginning to decline. Because you see here that 4th grade reading proficiency as of I believe this data is 2019. As of 2019, we're 26th in the nation. So we've gone backwards. In part, that's because we believe of much of the policy churn in Frankfurt, changing the accountability model, changing the standards, teachers not having the time to develop their skill sets in teaching those standards. But it's also because other states have passed us by. So again, it's a metric I use to say, here's an example of we've come so far, but we're not maintaining that progress and we're actually starting to see signs of decline. So it's really important that we all get involved and continue to push our state and each other forward. I noticed somebody in the chat said high school graduation, and yes, high school graduation is a metric that we certainly applaud. And when the committee started this work, again, in the 80s, our high school graduation rate was at the bottom of the national rankings or very near. So that increase in the high school graduation rate, yes, Lakin is thanks to Jane Bashir for leading the charge to increase the graduation rate and our school districts ensuring that they kept kids attached. So 3rd in the nation is fabulous. And on the heels of the sad passing of General Colin Powell yesterday, it's, a particularly, I think, soft moment for us to mention that high school graduation rate because his organization, America's Promise, led much of this work as well. What we know, though, as we celebrate that ranking is that high school graduation is not enough. It's necessary, but it's not wholly sufficient for Kentuckians to move along their path to a larger life. Because Kentuckians need a marketable degree, certificate, credential that allows them to compete in the economy. And that's becoming more and more true. It's not necessarily a 4-year degree. It's not necessarily a 2-year degree, but some type of meaningful, high quality certification is important. And so as we talk about the high school graduation rate, we also talk about the ready graduation rate. Yes, we're graduating folks at a high level. Are they really prepared for their next steps as they move on past high school into a post-high school path? How do we know they're prepared? What are the metrics we're using? And that's an ongoing conversation. So I'm sure you'll hear more about that. So I'm going to move from this slide into our next slide, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions. I see comments coming up in the chat box, but I also want to make sure we have time for you all to ask us questions. Another big piece of the Big Bold Future national rankings is that we added an equity lens to our national rankings, because that became increasingly important. The committee's work has always been about equity, but it was grounded in the early years much more in equity between urban and rural districts, and for families and students living in deep poverty. We know that increasingly we need to better understand how different populations of students are faring on the particular outcomes that set them up for success. In 2015 and 2016, we did an achievement gap report called Excellence with Equity. It's everybody's business. And we did that to better understand the achievement gaps in our state and to make sure we were focusing on targeted and intentional strategies to help all students and families be successful. So that equity lens is part of this Big Bold Future National Rankings report, in part because of that 2015-2016 work and everything that's come in recent years from a racial equity and justice standpoint. So you can see the difference, the disparities here, and I'll focus in on fourth grade reading proficiency again. For all students, the green bar, 35% of Kentucky's fourth graders met the proficiency benchmark on NAEP. That contrasted to or by the Black students who also met that proficiency benchmark is 14%. White students, 39%. So it begs the question, why is that the case? And what do we need to do to ensure that we have more equitable outcomes and that we're increasing outcomes well above 35, 39%, and even the high for Asian Kentuckians at 49%. So if we rest with a fourth grade reading proficiency rate no higher than 35% for all students, you all can do the backwards math and know how many students in Kentucky we're leaving behind. That should be a big concern for all of us. So Laura, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, where you see the equity lens in the two other categories of the Big Bold Future report. And in the, I'll give everybody a minute just to take those in. Also in the Big Bold Future National Rankings report, which Laura can send you a copy of, there's 5-year trend data. So we wanted to make sure we kind of understood not just the snapshot in time, but whether or not we're, we're improving, we're declining, we're stagnating. So that's important information as well. So in the actual report, you'll see that trend information. Okay, Laura, you can go to the next slide. So releasing the report was the first step. It's good data, important data for each of us to have, for us to have as a state. And I think an important role that the Pritchard Committee plays in tracking this data and getting it out to Kentuckians year after year after year. But we need to do more than that, as each of you know, or you wouldn't be here tonight. It's not enough for us to simply talk about what is. We have to move to action. And so moving to action includes both our policy agenda in Frankfurt, as we work on increasing adequate and equitable investment in education. And that's our big, bold ask that you see here on the left side of the screen. We launched 2 years ago a 6-year investment plan for early childhood, K-12 and post-secondary that will result in an additional $1 billion in funding to education within a 6-year time period. Last session, the 2020 General Assembly session, we actually met our mark in that incremental increase in those 3 areas. So we'll be going back with that in this next legislative session, and also have some other policy priorities in Frankfurt to increase teacher quality and provide the resources to teachers that they need to improve the craft of teaching and learning in the classroom. Then on the other side of the equation, so I like to think of the committee's work as bookends. We have our policy work, kind of our think tank work, research and analysis, our work in Frankfurt, but the other side of the bookend is the work that started all of this in the 1980s, and that is mobilizing Kentuckians to improve education. And that's the groundswell work. So as we think about an impact agenda for a big, bold future, it includes both of those bookends: policy at the state level and investment, as well as practice at the local level. So as you all are thinking about projects, that's the practice piece that we hope you will really lean deeply into. You will see us as a resource, and we will learn from you, and you will learn from each other. And so we will have many, many groundswells of action across the state, resulting in an incredible statewide groundswell that takes us to that top tier of the state for education outcomes. So the impact agenda includes both of those. So the next few slides, as Laura moves through, we'll kind of show you what this looks like as we take the early childhood, or the Big Bold Future national rankings. You see those 3 metrics at the top here. And then below that, you see a short list of leading local metrics. So remember, I said the national metrics are the best metrics we can use to compare ourselves to other states. But there are other important state and local metrics that are important for us to know whether or not we're beginning to move the needle. And so those are the leading local metrics. Laura, I think you mentioned at the beginning the community profile, which we're putting the final touches on. So those community profiles are those leading local metrics. So as an example, in early childhood, we're looking at preschool enrollment and kindergarten readiness. What is the preschool enrollment rate in a local community, a local district? What is the kindergarten readiness rate? Are 50% of your kiddos coming to school ready? Are less than that coming? What do we know through an equity lens about how kids are coming to school as far as readiness? And then do we have a groundswell locally? Do we have an engaged community? So that's the civic engagement piece as a leading local metric. Then on the left-hand side, you see the state policy and investment that we're building out as part of this impact agenda for a big, bold future, and the local practice. So on our state policy and investment agenda through our Strong Start Early Childhood Coalition are things like increasing the child care reimbursement rate and the preschool reimbursement rate to meet what we have measured as the cost of quality. So as an example, currently with the child care reimbursement rate to child care centers for families below a certain level of poverty, the reimbursement rate is about half of what it costs a child care center to maintain a high level of quality in an early childhood setting. So where does that other half come from? It certainly is not going to come from families paying for the cost of child care when our state is 6th from the bottom of the nation in poverty. So we encourage legislators to put investment behind that child care reimbursement rate, to increase that rate so it allows child care providers to offer a high level of quality and relieves working families from that significant cost of child care that I'm sure some of you know can rival the cost of a college tuition. Other things are increasing the eligibility for child care assistance and for preschool. Currently in the state of Kentucky, the eligibility threshold is 160% of the poverty level. We'd like to see that move up to 200% of the poverty level because we believe that's necessary to support working families and families going back to school to increase their skills in the marketplace. Then I'm going to drop down, just as I'm giving you examples, drop down to the other side of the coin, or the other bookend, the local practice, the groundswell work. What does this look like for all of you, or for Kentuckians who opt into our groundswell work? If you're passionate about early childhood and you want to move the needle on those leading local metrics, you might consider something like a kindergarten readiness campaign locally, and how you might design something like that to raise awareness for a local community about the importance of kindergarten readiness, what kindergarten readiness looks like, how a family can support kindergarten readiness. And over time, your goal would be that you actually see an increase in the kindergarten readiness rate in your local school or in your local community as a result of your campaign efforts. We have a large a community in Owensboro, Davis County, who is actually with a community-based organization and a local funder is taking on a designing a 5-year strategic plan for a high quality early childhood ecosystem. So that's a project as well, a groundswell or a local practice project that's being undertaken with the support of a local community-based organization and significant investment from a community funder. And then meaningful family engagement is something we include across the board for, just for the same reason you all are here. You know it's important to be engaged in your child's education, the impact that it has on your child, but also the impact that it has on your child's peers. And so, Laura, I know you'll get into that much more as you talk about the power of family engagement. But I just want to comment there, thinking back to my own experience with CIPL in 2000. That was probably one of the biggest takeaways that I took from that experience, is the power that I could have as an engaged parent in the lives of other students, in the outcomes of other students in my school district. So things as simple as other students knowing me, knowing I was kind of a trusted face, sitting at the lunch tables. Of course, this was pre-COVID, with my children, having lunch with their friends. Those sorts of things are really powerful when other students see you engaged with your student and see you caring about their outcomes as well. So I want to underscore that power that each of you will have and already have as an engaged parent in your local school district. So Laura, go ahead and flip to the next slide. And I won't read through these, but I'll just kind of let you take these in. So it's the same sort of framework for our impact agenda. The national metrics, the leading local metrics that we believe will put upward pressure on those national metrics, the importance of community engagement as one of those leading local metrics, the state policy and investment agenda that we have for Frankfurt. And at times you may get a call to action from us when we go through the legislative session around a bill that we're behind in for third grade reading and math proficiency. If that's something you're interested in engaging in, there will be opportunities for that. And we hope you would. And then again, the local practice piece. What are some ideas that we're learning from other communities as they're designing solutions to increase those leading local metrics? And here I'll pull out a community Fafsa completion campaign. Research shows that high school students who complete the federal application for the free application for federal student aid, if they're eligible, they're more likely to go on to college, and they're more likely to persist in their post-secondary program when they have that important financial support. Yet the participation rate in filling out the FAFSA, particularly in the last couple years, has significantly declined. So a FAFSA completion campaign at the local level, thinking about your sphere of influence. I like to use the one of my colleagues in our office who has long been involved with the Boy Scouts. If that's her sphere of influence, and she can talk about FAFSA completion for the Boy Scouts in the troop, that's a way for her to engage in this area where it may have an impact. But she could also think about a larger campaign. So that's just one example. As we identify these local practices, these groundswell actions, we're also interested in lifting up these stories so that we can share your work with others who are wrestling with how to improve these leading local metrics at the community level. Okay, go ahead, Laura. Higher education here, you can see some of the issues. I'll just note here that college going has also been declining in Kentucky. So as we think about post-secondary attainment or some attainment of a degree, credential, or certification being important for our forward movement as a state and decreasing poverty, if the college going rate is declining, we're creating challenges to improving that metric simply because we're not doing the work to make sure high schoolers are moving into a promising pathway for them. So the college going rate declining is a concern. And we think there are things that local communities can do to support a college going campaign. It's important when we talk about college going that we unpack, because if any of you do this, you may run up against people who say, well, all kids don't need college. And oftentimes they're thinking of 4-year baccalaureate degree, a 2-year associate's degree. And we would say, yes, of course, all kids don't need a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree, but we do know that all Kentuckians will need some marketable certificate, credential, or degree to compete in the marketplace today and into the future. And so unpacking college going as including all of those, even sub-associate level credentials, is important. All right, and I don't think we have an impact agenda for the quality of life bucket. So Laura, if you'll go. So the quality of life bucket, you know, the voter participation, median household income, and associate's degree. Really, if we're putting upward pressure on those 3 other buckets, we should see improvement in that quality of life bucket. Broadband, you probably didn't see on here, but you know that continues to be an issue. So we're looking for bright spots there as well as to how communities are fixing the broadband issue. But we need a big state investment, and Governor Beshear and the legislature dedicated funding to that in the last session. So as we wrap up, I wanted to turn our attention to not only the long term, but the immediate. So this is on everyone's minds, how we recover from COVID. How do we recover learning loss in an unprecedented time in the midst of a global health pandemic? Recovering from learning loss, helping our students recover from a social emotional standpoint as well as an academic standpoint is going to be important for them and achieving our long-term goals as a state. So we're really wrestling with what are the solutions that we can raise up to help districts and communities identify strategies to help with learning loss, but not only learning loss, building a new foundation for education. So getting back to normal is probably the wrong way for us to think about moving forward after the pandemic. We need to think about a new normal. So recovering now is important, but also thinking about how we recover in a way that leads to a new foundation for public education that's even stronger than public education before COVID is really important. And you all are on the front lines of all of this. So you have thoughts about how your children have been served the last now going on a good 1.5 years. And I'm sure you have thoughts about how you want them to be served in a public education setting as we move forward. And sharing those thoughts, sharing your innovations, sharing your preferences as a parent, as a family, your needs, I think are really important in helping us all collectively design the solutions and design the new foundation that will serve us well from a public education standpoint going forward. Laura, I'm gonna stop there after that flood of information. And maybe ask you, are there any questions in the chat box you want me to respond to? And then if you want to open it up and kind of facilitate any Q&A, as long as you want to do that, I'm here.
Sure. I actually am just going to scroll back here and see if you guys want to unmute actually and ask your question. But I think we'll start with Anna. Anna, do you want to introduce yourself to Bridget and ask your questions about, I think that you saw some of the information for our minority groups, but if you have any other questions around that, please use this time.
Yes, hi, I live in Oldham County and I work for Oldham County Schools, and I'm a bilingual coordinator. So my job is to connect multilingual families to community services. And my question was geared towards what are the statistics for minority groups in the state, but you did show that after I asked the question. But I was also wondering, are you guys aware of any studies regarding undocumented students and how it's a really worth for them the investment of post-secondary education if they're not going to be able to legally join the workforce? Because I work with a lot of students that have excellent GPA, but post-secondary education is not really an option because it's a lot of money that they're not going to be able to, you know, pay back, or because they won't be able to legally join the workforce. They're always going to have to work, you know, under.
Anna, this is an issue that we are really interested in, in a variety of different ways when we think about undocumented families and students. Most recently, and Laura can share more because she's been leading this work in Northern Kentucky, but most recently we've tried to better understand the issue with volunteer background checks and the barriers as a result of how districts manage those volunteer background checks for undocumented families to be engaged. And so we've been in conversations with the Department of Education around that issue. And Laura has a cohort of parents in Northern Kentucky who are interested in making sure Kentucky designs some fixes so that undocumented families can engage in their child's schooling at school. And so I think we have some promising information, and we hope to see some guidance on that issue from the Department of Education soon. But we're also hearing last night, in fact, in Louisville at a regional meeting that we hosted, one of the comments was that there, maybe in Jefferson County Public Schools, they're seeing Hispanic Latino students who are undocumented sign up for dual credit because they can take those dual credit classes without that documentation. But as they move into college, to your point, there's a big challenge. So the question was, how do we fix that? And I think one of the initial responses is, let's continue to make sure we're getting these students into dual credit classes so they have those dual credits under their belt as we're trying to fix the policy side, similar to the way we're dealing with the volunteer background checks. So I think that's a long way of saying this is the issue of undocumented families and students is important to us. And we know there are a variety of issues across the span of education that we'd like to better understand. And we would welcome you and others into that conversation so we can work with you on those issues and we can help push on the levers that you find are extremely important.
And if I can just add to that, we do have a Pritchard Committee member who's interested in this work as well. So going forward, this may be something to like explore around the project idea. I had an email yesterday regarding taking a state nursing assistant test for some folks who had gotten some dual credits and were wanting to take this test and weren't able to because of not having the Social Security number to do so. So I just want to say, you know, let's keep this at the forefront, and I'll try to get you connected to the other folks that I know are interested in the same issue. Thanks for bringing it up.
And Anna, I'll just add that this is a great example of Groundswell because we've got this little Groundswell in Northern Kentucky around this issue, albeit it's in the volunteer space in K-12, but you adding to it kind of this Groundswell component from Oldham and us hearing about Jefferson County, we create this nice, you know, bigger than the sum of its parts Groundswell on this topic in just this way. So you've provided us a great illustration. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
I'll move on to Kelly. Kelly, if you want to unmute your question around trend charts.
Yes, and I actually found that again. That came up. Yes, I found the link to that report. That's really interesting information. And then I had another comment later on, which is just, so not only am I a parent, but I'm a faculty member at Eastern Kentucky University. And so I appreciate that you all are doing work around higher ed as well, because it's a continuum, obviously. And yes. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly.
Sherry had our next question about other states that have shown significant growth. Sherry, are you on with us? You want to unmute?
Yeah, I was just curious if there was a state that had shown significant growth in any of the areas, and if there was anything that we could do to maybe replicate it.
Sherry, that's a great question. At a very high level, I just want to say that, you know, Kentucky's story of reform from the 1990s is one where we climbed from the bottom of the national rankings to roughly the middle. At just about the same exact time, Massachusetts entered a reform time period, and they climbed from the middle to, you know, they're seen as that top tier state for education outcomes now. I share that to say Kentucky should feel good about the progress that we were making, because we were making progress on track with those top tier states as they were entering into a reform period. So we can do it and we can get there. Your question at kind of the next level, if we look at particular metrics like third grade reading, who are the states that have made significant progress and what can we learn from them? You know, in the 1990s, that was Kentucky. We were among the top 4 or 5 states in the nation improving our outcomes. Most recently, that's been Mississippi. And there are similar stories there with Kentucky at the time and Mississippi more recently committing to a clear set of standards and accountability to improve outcomes and supporting teachers around the craft of teaching and learning in those areas. So we just wrapped up a task force on teaching last fall and are moving forward some pieces in the legislature based on Mississippi's story in part because of the question you asked. I have a memo on my desk in Lexington where I also asked one of our consultants this exact question: who are the top 5 states improving reading and mathematics in elementary school? And what do we know about what they've done in the last few years? And so it's hard to unravel sometimes. And a lot of times the answer is greater investment. So better resourcing those areas where you want to see improvement and holding the state and local districts accountable for that improvement. It's the right question you're asking, and I've actually thought it would be good for us to maybe have that kind of information for as many of these metrics as we can. Who are the top 5 states in these metrics, and what do we know about what they're doing if we control for socioeconomics? So again, many states are going to be higher simply because of the level of income and lack of poverty in their state, but we can learn from their strategies. So Sherry, we'll keep pushing on that one. And if there's a specific area that you're interested in, like the third grade reading and math, and want to have another conversation about that, or if there's another area where you're interested in what other states are doing, let Laura know and we'll see if we can get you some specific information.
All right, Darlene had a question about rankings. Darlene, are you still on the call?
I'm here.
Hi, Darlene.
Hello. As far as ranking 8th in the nation, how is it ranked as to Blacks versus whites?
Oh, great question, Darlene. Thank you. Because when we were, before COVID, when I was out there using that metric, we were 8th in the nation in 2015. We've declined. I was also saying to folks, while we were 8th in the nation in third grade reading, or 4th grade on NAEP, behind that was the fact that we had about 50% of our 4th graders meeting those NAEP proficiency benchmarks. And so we were leaving roughly 50% of our students behind, even when we ranked 8th. And if we disaggregated for Black students, for Hispanic students, you saw much lower proficiency rates. So even when we were 8th in the nation, there was a heck of a lot of work to do, and there still is. So I appreciate you asking that question, because that was an important onion to peel on that metric. Celebrate, yes, but hold on a minute. Let's really understand what's behind that metric, because we've got work to do.
And
perfect question.
Thank you, Darlene. I did want to mention that Kelly brought up that the trends really line up with poverty rates. And that was in the chat. Let's see.
Yep. And I'll just comment on that for a minute, Laura, if I can.
Sure.
You know, Kelly, that's so, socioeconomics are a predictive factor when it comes to education outcomes. And so it's always important for us to note as an organization that when we started this work in the 1980s, we said poverty is not going to be an excuse for us to improve our outcomes. So we need an adequate and an equitable system to fund education. We need an accountability model, and we need standards, and we need to support our teachers in developing good teaching practices to teach those standards in a very poor state, because we cannot let poverty be the reason we don't improve. That continues to be our commitment today, that poverty cannot be an excuse. That said, almost 40 years in, or 30 years in since CARA, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we as a state have not moved the needle on poverty. And if we don't start to move that needle through a post-secondary, a workforce, an economic development approach, we may have realized a good bit of the education improvement that we can realize without ensuring we're improving Kentuckians' lives on the back end. So it's a both and argument. It can't be an excuse, but we've got to look at how we as a state with a multifaceted approach are in fact improving the plight of families and students in our state.
Yeah, but I just want to just sort of emphasize that it's important to let the policymakers understand that the teachers can't do it all, right? Like
yes,
there are societal things we need to do to improve outcomes as well. So
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. No, teachers can't do it all, and they're asked to do much more than they ever were. We have, and Laura, I can get this to you to share at some point. It's probably a little bit dated right now, but we have research that we've used in the past that shows from a statistical standpoint that a teacher has, X% impact on student outcomes. So the highest quality teacher, the best prepared teacher who's on top of his or her game, has this, I think like 30% or something like that, impact on student outcomes, which is good, right? That's how Kentucky made some of those early gains. We leveraged as much of that impact as we possibly could. So we need to continue to, as we think about teacher quality and supporting our teachers and resourcing them. But we need to make sure families are have a better quality of life to then also make sure that our school system isn't having to mitigate for all of these challenges as a result of poverty. Kelly, thank you.
And Bridget, I don't think there were any other questions, but I do want to thank Jennifer. Jennifer dropped a link to the school report card, which we will dive into in another webinar, but thank you for dropping that in, Jennifer. I'm going to just open it up in case somebody did not put any questions in the chat but wants to ask questions now. You can go ahead and do that. We have about 5 to 10 more minutes left.
I have a question. I was wondering if you had looked, I mean, I imagine you have at the district level, and are there some districts that are making more progress in the direction you want to see, at least in a national level? I know it's apples and oranges, but have you looked at districts and seen what they're doing and how they're succeeding, and ways that we might transfer that to, have a good sort of contagion go on?
Yeah, excellent. I love that. Is it Lee or Leah?
Leah.
Leah, thank you. You all have the perfect questions. I'm thinking Laura scripted you all ahead of time. Great questions. A couple years ago, Leah, we did a report with the University of Kentucky called Bright Spots. We actually have 2 years of this bright spot reporting, where the University of Kentucky took school and district outcomes over a period of time and looked for exceptional progress, so better than expected results. So given the socioeconomics in the school district and some other issues, they were able to analyze if a district had made more improvement for students than would be expected given the makeup of the district. And we were able to name, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but let's say 20. We were able to name 20 schools and districts across the state as bright spots for achieving better than expected results in some area of education in K-12. And we can get that information to you. We have not, because of COVID, we have not been able to get out to those districts like we had planned to really tell the story that unpacks the analysis, to better understand what did they think led to those better than expected outcomes. So we would still hope to do something like that, but COVID changed everything, as you know. But I will share with you one story from South Heights Elementary in Henderson, Kentucky, where we went a number of years ago. It was actually one of our first bright spots when we were just looking at K-Prep data and K-Prep data that was a certain level above the state. South Heights Elementary was flagged for us in our analysis, and we went there to visit. The principal, bright spots, Suzetta just popped into the chat. We went there to talk to the principal, and it's a high poverty school, large minority population. The principal had been there for 20 years at the time, and he talked about the importance of awareness around the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and an approach to students that included deep understanding of social emotional development and trauma-informed practices. And he believed that wrapping all of that information, awareness, and skills around his staff, around his building, and then putting a Harlem Children's Zone around South Heights Elementary were the inputs that led to those better than expected results. The better than expected results at the time were that African-American elementary students in South Heights Elementary, their outcomes in reading and math were twice the state average. So significantly higher. So yes, we've done some of that and would really like to do more of that to start that contagion as you described. Because we know there are good stories out there too. As we talk about this data and we kind of feel like, oh, there's so much to do. There's also good work out there, and we have to strike that balance.
All right, anybody else have any questions? I agree with Bridget. These are great questions. I'm thinking about all of the things that we can do with these questions moving forward. And I think the information hopefully was very helpful when we were thinking about projects. So I kind of wanted to get this webinar under our belt before we really dive into what projects look like, because I think this is really foundational to some of the information that you're going to need. And we have a lot of resources here that I've made a list of that I'll make sure get added to your wrap up from tonight's webinar. So I just really want to thank Bridget for being with us. She kicks us off each year, and I think it's just great to kind of put in perspective the work that we're doing, and know that we will be seeing her from time to time, and any questions you may have along the way, just let us know and we'll get those answered for you. So,
and hopefully we'll see each other in person sometime. So we'll look forward to that.
That is the hope. So I think our engagement team is all present. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next part of our webinar tonight, which is meeting our engagement team. And so you will probably hear a lot from these folks through email, through some of our social media campaigns, and then they're just really supporters of CIPL in a way that I've kind of bounced around the office when I need things for the engagement work to my teammates, and they make up the engagement team. So I'm super excited that you guys get to meet them tonight. And I have Andrea and Suzetta's slide first. So if you guys are ready, we'd love to meet you.
Well, it's kind of hard to follow Bridget with all that information, so I'm going to keep it a little bit lighter. My name is Suzetta Creech. I am the Director of Community Engagement for the Pritchard Committee. I'm myself a 2006 CIPL graduate. When I went through CIPL when I had 3 children in public education here in Fayette County. So I'm super excited about CIPL. It's a passion project of mine, and I love what Laura does with the group. So welcome. We're so glad to have you part of our team. You will be getting emails from me periodically and some invites to some information. We hope you can join us at our regional meetings we're hosting in the fall. That would be great. If not, we have a virtual option next week as well. As Bridget said, we started the Groundswell Initiative in 2019 just as a way to re-engage folks and engage a new generation of Kentuckians that shared our vision and mission. And that is about 1,200, 1,300 strong right now. And you're part of that team. So we're going to rely on you to be the boots on the ground for us across the state, just reporting back to us. We hope it's a two-way communication. If you have concerns in your community, if you need resources, if you need us to come in to do a presentation or anything, you just reach out to us here in the office. We are located in Lexington, the Pritchard Committee is. There's 8 members on the staff, and we are staffed to you guys. Again, I'm really excited about working with you all and look forward to it. The Pritchard Committee operates within an engagement framework of studying, informing, and mobilizing. So we have a team that studies issues, that can answer questions to you. Some of the questions you've asked tonight, those folks can respond with you with data and reports. And then we have an informed team that I'm not sure if you hear from them tonight, but that's just about getting messages out, shared messages, also lifting your work up. We have a team that does that. And then our team mobilizes, and you're part of that effort. It's also cyclical because you'll come in and out of those 3 frameworks as you need information and then as you need help disseminating it. As part of this team, we have Andrea Jackson with us, who coordinates community engagement. So as you go through Groundswell and you hear from us and I share a lot of information with you, Andrea will kind of be that conduit from Laura to taking you on past your projects and engaging you into the Pritchard Committee. I'll turn it over to Andrea.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I had to switch to headphones because I'm sure, like many of you, there are little people walking around my house. So congratulations on the decision to take a step forward in parent leadership and joining the Commonwealth Institute for Parent Leadership. And I want to welcome you aboard. I am also a CIPL Fellow, class of 2019. And you've heard everyone on staff say that now. It's not a requirement of employment, but Suzetta and I were CIPL Fellows before joining the staff. So that's, kind of speaks to how important this work is. And Bridget touched on how, sometimes you land in the middle of your parent leadership in CIPL. Sometimes it's the beginning. For me, it was sort of the middle, but after my CIPL fellowship, working and volunteering in my son's school, I was honored as Parent Volunteer of the Year at a high school, which is kind of unique because you don't hear a lot of parent and family engagement at the high school level. And then I've gone on to be voted onto SBDM at my younger son's elementary school twice now. So I just wanted to emphasize what Bridget said about it being a springboard for your parent leadership. So like Suzetta said, you guys will hear from me as you end the journey of CIPL, as you start to work on your projects. I want to be involved and hear about them. And I did two 2 projects. I don't say that to brag, but I grew up in JCPS and I now live in Lexington and have kids in FCPS. So I wanted to be sure that I could contribute not only to where I grew up by doing a project in Jefferson County Public Schools, but I wanted to do one in Fayette as well. So I'd be anxious to offer support on any projects that you all have up and coming or any questions about projects. And as Laura spends this time to fill your buckets with everything parent leadership, I will be in touch with you, like I said, towards the end to shift you towards community mobilization. And what that looks like, a really great example is different organizations will reach out to us and say that they need a parent representative. They need someone's voice or need someone that's a seat at the table to help frame something they have going on in their organization. And we were able to offer some past CIPL fellows to help with strategic planning for out of school time and after school programs very recently. So I will be in touch with you all for opportunities like that. And then anything else you can think of, we're an awesome resource. And I think that's, about all I have to share. But again, I think that you all took a great step towards parent leadership. You're going to get a great deal of knowledge that maybe you didn't have before. I will say one more thing. I spent 14 years working for Fayette County Public Schools, and I learned more through CIPL than I did being an employee for all of that time. So get ready.
Thank you, guys. I do want to mention that Andrea's done a fabulous job of mapping out some of our Groundswell actions, and I'll make sure you have a direct link so you can see that, because I think that that too may help you kind of see what some projects may look like or inspire you in your own project. So thinking about those resources, the map, the video that we have from last year's graduation, the information that we've shared tonight, I think, you'll start to see that this resource list is building, and you probably have so many ideas and so many project ideas after tonight that you won't know how to narrow it down, and that will be a good problem to have. So our next person up on our team for engagement is Brooke. And Brooke and I work really closely together on the U.S. Department of Education grant and also CIPL. And so I'm excited to introduce you to Brooke.
Hi, everybody. Congratulations and welcome aboard. I'm also a CIPL grad. So like Andrea said, it's not a requirement for the Pritchard Committee, but many of us have gone through the CIPL Fellowship. So I'm excited to meet you all. Laura today, she goes, I know I say this every year, but this class is so good. I'm excited to see what you guys are interested in and get to know you guys over the next year. But I know this is a lot of text on one slide, but you'll learn about me that I create a lot of documents. I like to see things written out. And so I thought it would be helpful just to have this kind of tucked away so you can reference it as you get moving through the year and you kind of think of something and you're like, oh yeah, doesn't that have something to do with that Kentucky collaborative work? And so hopefully this is just a good kind of like one-pager reference point for you throughout the year. But I'm Brooke Gill, Director of Family Engagement, and this is my crew here. I thought some of last year's pictures would be fun for Halloween. So I've got a 4th grader and a kindergartner. I'm here in Lexington, and I head up the Kentucky Collaborative for Families in Schools. And what's really neat about Kentucky is that we're one of 12 states to receive the U.S. Department of Education grant to pilot the idea of what would a statewide family engagement center look like. And one of the big reasons that Kentucky received that grant is because of CIPL. So we've been doing parent leadership, before parent leadership was cool back in the 90s. And so we have a lot of history of what parent leadership can look like in the education system. And so we're building upon CIPL to create more of this system-wide family engagement center. So we're creating trainings, we're creating resources, guides, and we kicked off our family-friendly school initiative this year too. So we're just doing a whole host of of ideas and initiatives to try to create more opportunities for family engagement, both for parents, but also so that teachers can learn how to engage families. Because what we do know from research is when families come in and they've got skills and knowledge and opinions, and the school hasn't been trained up on how to have that conversation back, then you kind of hit a wall and it can feel a little bit confrontational rather than a partnership. So we really think about all of the things that we're doing through the Kentucky Collaborative as both building the capacity of families, but also schools to partner with families. So on this slide, I kind of just broke it into two big chunks. What we're going to be focusing on next year. So this is what we're gearing up for as we close out 2021. Just to kind of run through a few of these, thinking about how we can align things better across the state. We also are looking at teacher preparation programs. So what teachers learn in school as they're preparing to be a teacher. Do they learn about family engagement? Are they getting any content on how to partner with families? And how can we build that into Kentucky universities? That's going to be a really cool project. We're helping to certify schools as family friendly. So we're trying this new process where schools can go through certain steps and then apply to be a family friendly certified school. So that will actually be piloted this November for the first time ever in our state. So we'll see how that goes. We're pretty confident about it. And we had a lot of CIPL fellows from last year help us think about some of the materials that went into that certification. Likewise, we're looking at a certification for parents and for educators. So a school can be family friendly certified, but so can a parent leader and so can a teacher. Looking at two big events, November Family Engagement Week. So that's coming up November 15th through the 19th. I'm sure Laura will share goodies with you guys. And our Spring Summit, which will be in April. The sixth focus area is just how we communicate across the state. What are different ways that we have like a connections newsletter that I hope you guys will sign up for. So we'll have just a group thinking about how can that be better. I don't know if you guys get 100 newsletters, but I do. And it just feels like we're a little newsletter heavy these days. So what's a better way to, share good ideas with folks besides like emails and Facebook. So just kind of get more creative about our communications. And then our seventh focus area will be thinking about these family-friendly schools. So we have actually 60 as of tonight schools who have signed up to become family-friendly certified and work as a learning network on how to improve practices. So that's like our 7 big buckets, which I know is a whole lot, but again, just a point of reference for you guys as you move forward in your work. And maybe one of those 7 kind of jump out to you as really interesting or something you've already kind of thought about. And I would be happy if you wanted to join any of those committees or sub-work groups to kind of dive into those. So ways you can be involved, we have an advisory council for the Kentucky Collaborative that oversees all 7 of those focus areas for next year. And I would love if you guys wanted to join. I think Laura, do we already have 3 applications maybe from this crew?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So I just encourage you to join. You can listen and just kind of get a feel for the conversation and who's on the council. Don't feel like you have to be super opinionated right from the jump, but we do want parent leaders to join who aren't shy about speaking up. So we want to know if the ideas that we're suggesting are good ideas. And we need to know if families in Kentucky, kind of like what we're putting together. And we want to hear about that while we're still designing it, not, after it launches. And so that's what the advisory council is really all about, is giving some really good, honest feedback. Laura will also let you guys know who the family-friendly schools are. And if there's a family-friendly school in your area, then you might want to think about supporting that school, just letting them know that you're a CIPL fellow and that you'll be receiving, resources, and just kind of let them know that they've got a CIPL fellow in their backyard. That's always nice for schools to know that they've got a parent leader who's willing to help kind of on the sidelines. If you want to think about your projects, kind of focusing on any of these big areas, that would be cool. Even just to grab one of the resources and test it and let us know, like, hey, I tried this and here's what I thought about it, or here was my success story, or here's some edits I have. That would be really great timing for this crew of CIPL and the new resources that we're launching this year. Connections, again, is that newsletter. Just like our website, and as we ramp up our engagement efforts, when we try new things, it's always helpful. We'll send it to Laura, and Suzette and Andrea do the same thing. Hey, see what the parents think about this. What do you guys think? So just know if you're getting something from us, we want to hear your opinions, and it's okay if it comes back with all kinds of like red edits. This didn't resonate, don't like this, try this, that. The more comments we get, the better, because then we feel like we've got something to work with. So just kind of like user experience is what I put there. And then barriers. We learn a lot from CIPL fellows and parents in our programming about barriers that we don't know exist sometimes. And a really good example of that was with background checks with English language learner families in Northern Kentucky. They alerted us of some issues they had volunteering in the school because of the background check requirements. And Laura was able to work through that process with some folks on the state level and through the Pritchard Committee. And I'm sure you'll hear about that success story, but that came from families just speaking up and telling us, hey, this is a big barrier you may not know about. And so that's always really helpful as you guys work through your fellowship. So that's all I had, but nice to meet you all. And that's kind of the scope of work that we'll be looking at to close out 2021 and into 2022.
Thanks, Brooke. Suzetta put some information there about like the connections we'll help you with as well, related to Pritchard Committee members, other Groundswell members, and then family-friendly schools that Brooke just mentioned. And family-friendly schools was that resource that I put in the announcements around, like, this is a page that you can go to. It's not open to the public yet, so I gave you guys a password. If you haven't had a chance to dive into that yet, you might understand it a little bit more now that Brooke was able to kind of dig into that. But I will say that if your school is not participating, which there's a good chance that they may not be because there's only 60 in the whole state, and you're really kind of stuck on a project because family engagement is something your school needs to work on, that could be a project. And thinking about creating a family engagement team within your school district and then walking through those resources with the school and then having the school apply to be a certified school, that would be huge if you know that that's a place that your school is lacking in terms of family engagement. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there as well. And then I don't think Jessica's on with us tonight, but we do have a communications director. She puts together lovely announcements and our Big Bold Future Report, all of the great graphics and things in that. I'll make sure that we connect you with her at some point. But, last year, a parent really wanted to kind of collect stories around how COVID was impacting families. And Jessica was also looking at that from a communication standpoint. And so they were able to connect. So sometimes the project may be connecting with somebody in our office, and your project may help inform the work that we're already doing. So we say district, but I will say that there are some projects that I think cross over into the work that we're doing at our level for the state. So if that makes sense. Do you guys have any questions for our engagement team? You will, like I said, this will be the group of folks you hear from the most. So there'll be all kinds of opportunity to connect with them along the way. But just while we have them on the phone tonight, or I keep saying phone, but I guess it's computer. If you have any questions, now would be the time. You guys must have done a fabulous job. So reach out to them. You don't always have to go through me. So like Andrea mentioned, she's got some knowledge to share around her project, and she's, you know, in Fayette County, so she's a little more centrally located to some of you guys. We've got a large Madison County population this year. Anything else anybody wants to wrap up with before I go into some final details? Suzetta saying goodbye.
Brooke shared her lovely children, and I didn't get to add that I have, oh, maybe I did. I have a senior in high school and a 4th grader. So I've already gone through the woods, and then I'm back in them.
That's a great way to put it. I'm right there with you. All right, so some reminders. We have, starting in 10 minutes, we have our family room, which occurs once a month, and you can, that's optional, but if we really encourage you to join that at least twice within the year that you're involved in CIPL. So if you want to stay on tonight, I'll be dropping the link. And it's an informal conversation. Tonight's focus is on parent-teacher conferences. And I know a lot of folks weren't able to actually join tonight because of parent-teacher conferences. So this is the week. I think some happened last week, but that's our topic for tonight. The other big news is that you have the kind of the schedule for the Family Engagement Week, or you know the dates, and we're going to get a more detailed schedule out to you. But something to note is that our next CIPL webinar will actually be during Family Engagement Week, and it's open to the public. So we will be allowing others to join, and it's all focused on parent leadership opportunities. So we're going to kind of walk through what are those parent leadership opportunities in our state and hear from some of the folks who play an important role in those opportunities. So that will be November 16th. And we will be on again from 6:30 to 8. So anybody having trouble with the all-in-one document that's on Google? No, everybody's been getting it okay. So just a reminder that following this webinar tomorrow morning, you'll get an email recap with the PowerPoint, the recorded version of this, and then links to the survey, but all of that will also be in your all-in-one document on Google. So I'm going to go and grab the Zoom if you would like to join Family Room tonight. And if not, just take some time, look over your calendar and see if there's a time that we could chat about projects, and I'll be starting to schedule phone calls with individuals, and we'll go from there. All right.
Laura, do you have
Sure.
examples of what some of the future family room topics might be?
So we're going to just extend the family leadership conversation in November, and that will be kind of the focus on a lot of our past fellows, or even in this class, I think some of you guys serve in some roles like SBDM, school board members. There's some challenges and barriers that some of you guys are facing, and it helps to kind of bounce those ideas off of others. So we have some guiding questions. So November's topic will be around family leadership opportunities. So we'll go from the webinar where we're kind of talking about what those opportunities are, and then people will kind of share their experiences with those in the family room.